We're live here on the shot clock. Quick recap of Warriors-Wolves game 1 and Pacers-Cavs game number 2. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with the Warriors-Wolves because that game was just happened, obviously, and just finished. Now, here's what I would say. An overall takeaway from these game 1s in general, right, is I would not take too much into a lot of these game 1s so far. Now, I'll tell you why. It's a common trend. It was a trend in these game 1s in this second round of the playoffs, which was historic, by the way. Never has the road team won all 4 game 1s in the conference semifinals in NBA history. So that's the first time it's ever happened. And now the road teams are 5-0 after the Pacers won game 2 tonight as well. So that's the first time that's ever happened. So that's just insanity. So all 4 favorites are down 1-0 in the series, at least. And obviously the Cavs are down 2-0. So the reason I would say don't take too much from it, I know the Warriors lost Steph tonight. And listen, hamstrings are tricky. He's probably going to be out a couple of games would be my guess, which made that game all the more important for Golden State, more so than Minnesota. But we've seen now in these game 1s, these home teams that have long layoffs, whether it's Minnesota, whether it's OKC, whether it's Boston, whoever, Cleveland, they were rusty in game 1. They were all rusty in their game 1s. Every one of them. Look at the shooting numbers, right? We know Boston missed a career, missed an NBA league history record, 45 threes in game 1 in their series. Well, Minnesota tonight shot 5 for 29 from 3 and shot 39% from the floor. Anthony Edwards was 0 for his first 10. Cleveland was 8 for 40 in their first game from 3. So Russ has played a big factor in all 3 of those games. And to be quite honest, even with that, the Celtics were up 20 in the second half. They blew that game. Give the Knicks credit, but the Celtics were up 20 in the second half. They should have won that game. And the Thunder were up 14 in the fourth quarter and were up 5 with under a minute left, and they blew that game. They should have still won, with all that said. So I would not take too much stock in these game 1s, even though it was a historic first 5 wins for the road teams. It was historic beginning to this round. I would not take too much from that if I was, just an observer of the NBA playoffs. It doesn't mean that those 4 road teams can't end up winning the series. They definitely can. And you'd rather start off 1-0 than down 0-1. But with that said, I would look towards game 2 and 3 to tell you everything you need to know about those series. I'm not worried about Boston. The only thing I'd be worried about there is Porzingis' illness situation. It looks like he's probable for game 2. So that's a good sign for them. I'm not worried about Boston. I'm not worried about Minnesota. And now especially that Steph is probably going to miss 2 to 3 games, I think, with minimum in this series. Hamstring strains, depending on the severity, can be tricky. I'm not worried about Minnesota. I think Minnesota gets game 2, and I think they'll come back. And I pick Minnesota to win in 7. I'm very confident that that's going to happen. They were terrible tonight on offense. Can't win games playing offense like that. You see it right there. And Golden State played a good game. Golden State was coming off a high 2 days ago. They're in rhythm. They played a good game. And the Wolves, you just chalked that one up to rust, in my opinion. I would expect Minnesota to bounce back in game 2. So not worried about Boston, not worried about Minnesota, not worried about OKC. Now, the one thing I would say about OKC is with Denver, that's a championship team that's done it. They've won a title a couple of years ago. They have the best player in the league in Jokic. They have championship pedigree on their team. Guys who have rings. So you don't want to fool around with that because that team has experience. They know what it takes. And they can be tricky. But I'm still not worried about OKC. That was a game that they should have won. They had in the bag, really. And if they make 2 free throws, they win the game. The team that I'm worried about is the team that's down 2-0 for obvious reasons. And not because they're down 2-0. Because, frankly, Cleveland choked that game tonight. They gave that game away with both hands. You couldn't lose that game tonight. If you played it another 100 times, you would win it the next 100. Up 7, 45 seconds to go. Almost impossible to lose that. And now the Pacers have 2 wins in this postseason, down by 7 with 40 seconds left, which is crazy. This is really Reggie Miller reincarnated. If you remember back in the 90s, Reggie Miller scored 6 points in 18 seconds. They upset the Knicks in game number, I think it was 1 or 2 in 1995 NBA playoffs. So, but the reason I'm worried about the Cavs is not because I think they've been outplayed, because I just don't think they have. Tonight they threw the game in the toilet. But when you're playing without 3 of your key players, and we don't know the status on those guys. They didn't have Garland in game 1, huge factor. He's their second best offensive player. They didn't have Garland tonight. They didn't have Mobley tonight. They didn't have Hunter tonight. That's 3 of their 5 best players. So then it becomes Donovan Mitchell and a bunch of backups, and that's your team. Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, and a bunch of backups. So the Cavs, to me, this is not a fair fight right now. And it looks like Indiana has the fate of God, because this is the second straight year now they've played a team in the conference semifinals that they are not as good as. And both those teams had basically half their team get hurt. The Knicks, as we know, were playing without Randall already. They lost Bogdanovich in the first round. They lost OG Anunoby in game 2 and they were up 2-0 in that series. They lost OG Anunoby, then they lost Josh Hart, and then Brunson got hurt in game 7. So the Pacers basically had a free ride to the conference finals last year. They would not have won that series if the Knicks were healthy. And now this year, again, they play Cleveland without Garland game 1. They play Cleveland tonight without Mobley, Garland, and Hunter. They still should have lost the game, and they end up stealing the game. The Cavs should win this series. If the Cavs were healthy, they'd win this series in 5 games. Someone needs to say it. I don't care what anyone says about it. I don't care if anyone disagrees. Pacer fans, whatever. I don't care. The Pacers are not as good as the Cavs. They weren't as good as the Knicks last year. This has been complete luck. It doesn't mean they're not a good basketball team. They're a good basketball team. They're just not as good as those teams. And they wouldn't win those series. And they would not win this series against Cleveland. They would not. I'm not going to take anything away that it could be 1-1 if Cleveland had their full team, but I think if Cleveland had their full team, including Garland, they'd be up 2-0 right now. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes. Basketball is played like that. Injury is part of the game. It's the way it is. We've seen it every year. Teams get to the finals based on injuries. Other teams don't win because of injuries. It happens. It is what it is. We saw Giannis get hurt how many years in a row for the Bucks? It is what it is. But the truth of the matter is, Minnesota, rust. Not worried about them at all on game 1. Boston, same thing. Now, we'll see what happens game 2. If it's similar in game 2, which I don't expect it to be, then you might have some concern. Those 2 teams I'm not worried about. Same with OKC for the most part. Although Denver is a championship, they've won a championship. So that's a dangerous team that you don't want to give too much confidence to. But those 3 teams, I would say, wait till games 2 and 3 before you hit the panic button there. Because I don't think you should yet. There was a lot of the layoff hurt those teams in game 1. I think it was pretty obvious by the shooting numbers. All 3 of those teams had terrible shooting games in game 1. And the Cavs did as well. Now, like I said, the Cavs, on the other hand, have serious problems because of these injuries. You cannot win a series against any decent basketball team without your 2nd, 3rd, and 5th best player. It's just not going to happen. And that's what the Cavs are going up against. And tonight they played with 3 of their 5 starters out. I mean, what are you going to do with that? And they still were up 7 with 45 seconds left. They should have won that game, regardless. So, I don't mean to pour cold water on the Pacers and Pacers fans, but this is not a real series right now. So I'm not giving any credit to Indiana for tonight's game. I'm sorry. I'm not. Sure, did they steal the game down 7, 45 seconds and he had a big 3, Halliburton? Yes. But you're playing a team that's with their hands tied behind their back right now. And you don't apologize for that if you're the Pacers, but as someone who's calling it like it is, who's calling it down the middle here, I'm going to tell you straight. The Pacers would not be up 2-0 right now if Cleveland was healthy. They would not. They would not. They'd probably be down 2-0, to be completely honest with you. So they've been the most lucky team on this side of, whatever you want to say, whoever you want to say has been lucky in the past however many years. Luck's part of the game, I get it. But we're talking about major injuries now to the two teams they played in the conference finals last year and this year. It doesn't get any luckier than that. The Cleveland Cavaliers cannot win this series without their second, third, and fifth best player. They just will not do it. Donovan Mitchell has to score 50 every night. He had 48 tonight. They still should have won, and they choked the game away. It should be 1-1 even in that circumstance. So what I would say about that is if the Cavs can get these guys back, and I don't know the status of Garland, Mobley, or Hunter, if they're not going to come back, the Cavs will lose this series in 5 games. If they can get those guys back, I think the Cavs can still win this series. I do. I think they're the better team. I think if they're fully healthy, they're by far the better team. And I think they could go into Indiana and win both games if they are at full strength. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I would think the best you can hope for is getting 1 or 2 of the guys back. I don't know how you're going to get all 3. Maybe they get lucky and they do that. If they do, I think they could get back in this series. It's been extremely unfortunate for Cleveland. And if you're a Cavs fan, there's nothing you can do about it. You shake your head because it doesn't get any unluckier than that. Losing those guys at this time of the year. It sucks. Just like the Warriors are going to feel that without Steph Curry now. And if Steph Curry's out for any extended period of time, and like I said, that's a strained hamstring. That is not an injury, that's a minor injury. And obviously there are different severities of it, there are different grades hamstrings, but if you have a grade, even if you have a minor grade 1 hamstring, you're out a week to 2 weeks. Like, you're going to miss 2 to 3 games. And that could be the series in those 2 to 3 games. That's why I thought tonight was more important for Golden State to get that game than it was for Minnesota once Steph got hurt. Minnesota could come back in this series. They were rusty tonight. They didn't have anything up on the offensive end. No one could make a shot. So chalk that up to a rust game, to a layoff. You know, they weren't in rhythm, and I think they'll come back in game 2. Golden State had to have that game. And give Golden State credit. Hield had a huge second half. 24 points in the game. I think he had 22 in the second half, something like that. Butler was Butler. 20 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 steals. You know what he does. Makes winning plays. Does what it takes to win. Draymond had a big first half. Didn't play as well on offense in the second half. But listen, anytime you get 18 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and 4 threes from Draymond, I mean, you take that in a heartbeat. And obviously the Warriors don't have much of a bench. We know that. They're not going to get much out of their bench. But if you look at the Minnesota side, that's where this game was won and lost. Julius Randle had a nightmare of an offensive game. Now, he made 10 of 10 at the line. He got to the foul line, but he was 4 of 11 from the field. Only 18 points. That's not going to cut it as your second scorer. Jaden McDaniels, he was fine. He didn't hit any threes, but he was fine. Good on defense as usual. Anthony Edwards had a brutal beginning of the game. 0 for his first 10. Ended up with 23 points, 14 rebounds, 9 of 22 from the field, but it was worse than that. And listen, like I said, they shot 5 of 29 from 3, as you can see right there. And 39% for the game. You're not going to win games like that, folks. You've seen this in 2025. Excuse me, in these playoffs in 2025. You're not winning games when you're shooting, 10% from 3, 20% from 3. You're not going to win games like that. The Warriors made 18 threes. The Wolves made 5. What's the difference in points there? 54 points to 15 points. That's 39-point difference. That's the game. You're not winning games when you're getting outscored by 39 points from 3. It's not going to happen. We've seen it in every single game in these playoffs. So, the Timberwolves, I'm not going to take much out of this game. I think it was more of rust, and I think it was more the layoff as to why they didn't have a good game tonight. Give the Warriors credit. They played a good game anyway, and give them credit for that. Without Steph to play well and to win by the margin they did, give them credit. But like I said, Wolves get back to game 2, get a little rhythm going, and I think they'll be fine. They'll win game 2. But if you're Cleveland, man, I feel so bad for the Cavs fans because, and as someone who roots for the Knicks, I experienced this last year when the Knicks lost basically half their team due to injury. There's nothing you can do about it. And you just don't have enough bodies to overcome the loss of a Darius Garland, an Evan Mobley, and a DeAndre Hunter. You just can't do it, no matter how good Mitchell is. And the thing I think if you're Cleveland, you'll be kicking yourself is that you gave that game away tonight. And at least if you win that game, and you can't lose that game up 7 with 45 seconds left, it's almost impossible to lose. And if you win that game and you're 1-1, then you get a couple of these guys back, and then all of a sudden you feel fine. You're like, all right, we're fine. We're 1-1. We haven't had any of our players. And now we'll get them back, and we can get back and win this series. Well, now you're down 2-0 going on the road, and you don't know the status of those guys. So now you pretty much need all 3 of them to come back to even get this, because you got to win the next 2 games in Indy to make this a real series. Obviously, you can come back down 3-1, I get it, but if you really want to have a chance to really make you got to win the next 2 games in Indy. And they're going to have to get their guys healthy to do that, because with the lineups they're playing, okay, let me tell you this right now. This was the starting lineup for Cleveland tonight. Okay? The Cavs trotted out there in the starting lineup. Dean Wade, Ty Jerome, and Max Strus. No disrespect to any of those guys. They're good rotation players in the NBA. But, and I know Strus starts anyway, but DeAndre Hunter is really the starting, he comes off the bench, but he's a starting caliber player. So when you're playing without your number 2 offensive scorer in Garland, your number 3 offensive player, and the best defensive player in the NBA this year in Mobley, and then your best 3-and-D wing player in Hunter, there's just only so much you could do. You're playing Javonte Green and Sam Merrill off the bench tonight. And Merrill had a decent game, actually. But it's just not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. And I think the thing that frustrates you the most is they blew that game tonight, even with all that on the line. Even with all that being true, they still should have won the game. Led the entire way. Led by 7 with 45 seconds. It's just a game you can't lose. You can't lose it. And now they're in trouble. But like I said, if they could get these guys back healthy, I think they could still win the series. It's just a matter if they can do that. So, all 4 road teams win game 1. The Pacers also win game 2. So the road teams now in this round are 5-0. Never happened in the history of the NBA. Game 2 tomorrow night. Knicks, Celtics, game number 2. Nuggets, Thunder, game number 2. In Boston, in OKC. We'll be live on TikTok for the second half of Knicks, Celtics. We'll be doing play-by-play of that second half. And we'll be live on TikTok. And we'll then, live play-by-play, second half TikTok, Knicks, Celtics. Then we'll be here, right here on YouTube for a post-game recap of that one as soon as it's over. And then we'll be live on TikTok for the 4th quarter play-by-play of Thunder Nuggets game 2 as well. So we'll see you tomorrow back here on TikTok, live, and here on YouTube as well. The shot clock is out. Peace.